The first sign wasn't the lipstick. It wasn't the new underwear either, though the tag left on the dresser like a careless feather should have told me more than it did. It was the way the apartment started breathing without her voice, like the walls had decided to teach me the sound of my own silence. The kettle clicked and cooled without tea, the television showed muted faces mouthing the news, and our chairs, angled toward each other like two people still trying, drifted apart over weeks so slowly that noticing it felt like betrayal to myself. We used to eat at the small table by the window where the city spilled its evening light in a gray wash across our plates. Lately, she took her bowl to the couch, watched something on her phone, laughed into her sleeve at jokes I couldn't hear. I tried to ask about her day, but my questions landed like paper airplanes with wet wings sliding to the floor between us. Work was fine. The gym was good. Her friend Claire was busy. The air carried the smell of something sweet and unfamiliar, vanilla, but brighter, and it lingered after she left the room, as if the apartment were trying to remember someone else's footsteps. I started doing small things to feel useful, fixing the loose handle on the bedroom door, organizing the cutlery drawer, polishing the kettle until I could see my face bending across its curve. On Tuesday, the rain came down in sheets, a steady, forgiving noise, and I thought about making soup. I thought about warmth. I thought about the last time we took the same side of the sidewalk and didn't need to negotiate who would walk in front to avoid bumping shoulders. She came home late. The door clicked at 9:47. Her shoes were new, pointed, glossy, the kind of black that swallows streetlight and turns it into secrets. She smelled like rain and perfume. She kissed my cheek and said, "Hey," in a voice that tried to be casual but was overdressed for the occasion. I watched her move through the hallway with a kind of choreographed efficiency, like she had learned the apartment again from a blueprint and was now tracing it carefully. "Long day?" I asked. "MMHMM. She opened the bedroom wardrobe and stood there with her back to me, as if the clothes might answer first. "I'm going to shower." I nodded at the kettle. "Want tea?" "No, thanks." She closed the wardrobe softly. "I'm good." The shower ran, the window fogged. In the mirror above the sink, I could see the reflection of the kitchen, my shoulders hunched like I'd taken on extra weather. The rain pressed its face to the glass and stayed there, nuzzling. I picked up her bag from the chair to move it aside so I could sit, and it was heavier than usual. Inside, her wallet, her keys. A small paper bag from AP, the boutique on Denham Street that does the kind of lingerie you buy for a story you haven't told yet. I didn't open it at first. I put it back as if it were hot. I stood there with the chair between my knees and the rain between my ears, and I tried to remember the last time she had bought something delicate for us, for me, for the body I had memorized in a bed we both still slept in. The shower stopped. My heart moved to my throat like a bad tenant. I took the bag out again and slipped the ribbon free, slowly, as if I could undo time if I didn't hurry. New lingerie is a language, you know when it's speaking to you. This was speaking to someone else. Black lace the color of her new shoes, a cut that felt like a dare, a price tag that could fund a weekend away if we were still investing in weekends away. The bathroom door opened with the soft exhale of steam. She stepped into the hallway in a towel, hair slicked back, face scrubbed clean of the day, and saw me holding the bag like a question I had already asked. "What's that?" she said. But her eyes knew. They went distant and then came back like they were running late. "I was moving your bag," I said. "This fell out." It's just," she reached for the bag, then stopped halfway, fingers hovering. "It's nothing." "Nothing has weight. Nothing has a scent. Nothing has a receipt from a boutique that sells stories by the hour." I put the bag on the table and stepped back, as if giving it room might make it explain itself. The apartment looked at us from every wall, expectant. "For me?" I asked. The question tasted like a test I expected to fail. Her mouth opened and closed around an answer that didn't arrive. She looked at the rain like it might volunteer. Then, as if the script demanded an exit, she straightened. "I'm tired," she said. "Can we not do this tonight?" Not do what? Not be the people we promised to be. Not become the empty rooms we had been practicing for weeks. That night she fell asleep with her back to me, breathing slow, careful breaths. I lay awake and counted the cars that hissed past below, each one smoothing the road like a hand over a wrinkled sheet. The lingerie bag sat on the dresser, black ribbon coiled like a whisper. In the morning it would be gone. By Thursday, dinners turned into arrangements. She worked late. I covered the plants. The city went on swallowing its own light. I found a message on her iPad, left unlocked on the kitchen counter. Just a fragment, a name I didn't recognize, a sentence that felt like a plane ticket. Tonight was, "I can still feel you." I put the iPad down with the reverence of a man returning an artifact to its museum base. The kettle clicked, but I didn't make tea. The rain held off, sharpening every sound into something you could carry with 2 fingers. I washed an already clean glass. I watched the door. When she came home, she wore that new perfume again, and a look that tried to be ordinary. I could feel the collapse beginning somewhere behind my ribs, slow, inevitable, like a building giving up its last argument against gravity. I asked if we could talk. She nodded, sat, and folded her hands in her lap, the towel crease still faint on her wrist. "I saw a message," I said. "I need you to be honest with me." Her eyes fluttered, closed for a second, then opened, the way a swimmer surfaces and considers the sky's answer. "Okay," she said, "ask me. Is there someone else?" The clock on the wall ticked with brand new arrogance. The apartment held its breath. She looked at our chairs, at the window, at me. Her voice was softer than the rain when it wants to be invisible. "Yes." Silence widened until it was a new room we had never furnished. The kettle clicked again, as if to say, someone should do something. I stood, then sat again, because my legs belonged to yesterday. She wiped a tear with the side of her hand, not wanting me to notice the ritual of it. "How long?" I asked. "A while," she said. "I didn't mean to." "Mean to is a bridge that collapses the moment you step onto it." I nodded as if nodding could keep my head attached. "Do you love him?" The question escaped, a stray cat at the door. She didn't answer, which was an answer. I went to the window and pressed my palm to the cool glass. The city was still raining even when it wasn't. I saw us in the reflection, two people standing in a kitchen that deserved laughter. Somewhere in the apartment, the black ribbon tightened on its own. She whispered, "I'm sorry." I said nothing. There are apologies that need an empty room to echo correctly. That night, sleep was a place in another city. When I finally drifted there, I dreamed of our chairs dragging themselves back together while we watched from the doorway, unable to step in. In the morning, her side of the closet looked lighter, as if the clothes had decided not to sleep there anymore. On the dresser was the bag from AP, gone now, replaced by a small note that said, "I need time to think." The handwriting was hers, too neat for the mess. The apartment exhaled. The rain returned as if called by name. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and felt the floor ease under my feet, like a boat remembering how to drift. And then my phone lit up with a message from a number not in my contacts. "We should talk." The name at the end was a man's, the same one I had seen on her iPad. The other man had entered the room without opening the door. The kettle began to boil and no one turned it off. The apartment filled with a quiet, rising urgency, a white noise that asked a single, simple question: what will you do now? The days that followed were made of thin glass. Everything looked normal from a certain angle, but even the softest touch could crack them. I moved through the apartment like a careful thief, taking only what I needed to make it to the next hour. A clean mug, a towel, the belief that silence could be a kind of bandage. Nights were the worst. Nights were a museum of our old life curated by a cruel archivist, every exhibit displayed under gray light, every label handwritten in the tense loop of regret. She stayed away at first. "Space," she wrote. "I don't want to hurt you more." The audacity of tenderness. I answered with nothing, not because I wanted to punish her, but because language needed to be disinfected. I didn't trust words. They had been there when the lie walked in wearing new lingerie. The message from him sat in my phone like a small, hot stone. "We should talk." He'd sent it at 1:13 a.m., the hour when certainty goes soft. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked through rooms and counted their corners, as if geometry could keep me from drowning. 4 corners in the living room, 4 in the bedroom, 2 in the narrow hallway, pretending to be 4. The bathroom had a window that faced the brick wall of the building next door, and in the morning the light there came in humble, square, and apologetic. On the second night, sleep refused to let me in at all. I took the old blanket from the back of the couch and sat on the floor by the window. The streetlight outside hummed its small, persistent hymn. Far away, a siren rose and folded back into the city's chest. I imagined her wherever she was, on a couch that wasn't ours, playing with the unraveling thread of a conversation that had been waiting for them, apparently, for a while. Did she laugh? Did she remember the way the kettle sounds when it clicks off? Was she wearing the black lace? I didn't realize I was crying until a drop landed on my wrist and surprised me, as if it belonged to the rain seeping through the window. It wasn't dramatic. It was just the body doing what the heart asked it to do, in a language older than pride. By morning, salt had dried on my skin. I showered. I made coffee and didn't drink it. I stared at the cup until the surface stopped steaming and went still enough to reflect my face. A person can look like a stranger inside their own kitchen in under a week. I learned that. On the 3rd day, he called. The number flashed and I let it ring out. He texted again, "Please, this is Felix." The name felt wrong in my mouth, too delicate for the damage. I typed, erased, typed again. Finally, "What do you want?" The dots appeared and disappeared, as if he were deciding what kind of man to be in this conversation. "To meet," he wrote, "to explain." Explain what? The angle of her laugh, the shape of her need, the mathematics of timing. I told him no. He asked again. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said. I think you deserve to hear it from me. Deserve? People love to wrap selfishness in gift paper. I said yes. We chose a cafe on Mercer, neutral ground with plants that tried too hard and baristas who spoke coffee like a second religion. The sky threatened rain but held it, the way you hold bad news behind your teeth. I arrived early and sat by the window, where the light made everyone look like they were auditioning for their own lives. He walked in 5 minutes late, younger than me by a handful of summers, hair too carefully careless, wearing a shirt that let you know he worked somewhere where shirts mattered. He saw me, recognized me. I don't know how, but people can smell certain moments on each other, and approached with a cautious half-smile. Thanks for meeting me, he said. I nodded at the chair. He sat. The table between us was the width of anger that had decided to be polite. We ordered coffees like it was a business appointment. He wrapped his hands around his cup as if it were a confession. I'm not here to fight, he said. I want to say I'm sorry. I know that doesn't help. I looked at the window where the sky was rehearsing different grays. How long? I asked. About 6 months, he said, and the number sat between us, a little animal that didn't know who it belonged to. We met at that charity thing, the one at the museum. I remembered she'd come home glowing with art and wine and stories about people whose names didn't stick. She'd kissed me in the doorway and said I should have been there. Maybe that was the first misstep, the way I laughed and said, next time. Maybe there isn't a next time if you keep promising it to the wrong moments. Did she tell you about me? I asked. Yes, he said. She said you were good, he winced. I'm not doing this right. There's no right way, I said. He nodded. We didn't plan it. I know everyone says that, but she was unhappy. She said she felt unseen. He lifted his eyes. You'll hate me for this, but I think she loved you. I think she still does. Love is a house that can hold more than 2 people until it can't. I let his sentence sit. It tried to be kind. It failed. We weren't going to tell you yet, he added, and there it was, the imagined grace of liars. We were trying to figure it out. I told her to be honest. She said she would. She was, I said, eventually. Silence went to work. People came and left, cups clinked. A child pointed at the plant in the corner and said tree with the triumph of a tiny explorer. Felix watched me with the awkward reverence of someone who knows he is trespassing at a grave. What do you want from me? I asked. He shook his head. Nothing. I just needed you to know I'm not a monster. I thought about monsters. My father used to say they're just men with a talent for pretending their needs are emergencies. Maybe I'm one too, I thought. Maybe we all are on different nights. I stood. He stood with me. We reached across the table like diplomats and shook hands like that meant anything. His palm was warm, human. The exit door made a soft bell noise as I left. Outside, the rain decided to begin after all, a thin, earnest drizzle that felt like the city apologizing for something it couldn't name. Back at the apartment, I opened the wardrobe and looked at her dresses. I took her navy one, the one she wore to my sister's wedding, and folded it carefully, then unfolded it, then folded it again. I wasn't packing. I was practicing. I went to the kitchen and made dinner for 2 and ate one. I set her chair straight. I wiped the table as if erasing a sentence that refused to leave. That night, I lay in bed and placed my hand on the empty part of the mattress where her weight used to be. The indentation was still there, a geography of absence. I mapped it with my palm. I whispered goodnight to no one quietly so the apartment wouldn't feel responsible. The text came at 2:04 a.m. Can I come by tomorrow to get some things? It was her. Yes, I wrote. My fingers hovered. When? Evening, she said, after work. I put the phone face down like it could see me shaking. Sleep arrived in small, exhausted parcels. In one of them, I dreamed the kettle boiled and never clicked off. In another, I opened the AP bag and found a note that said, "This is not about you." When morning came, it opened the curtains without asking. The day was a waiting room. I cleaned things that were already clean. I opened windows to let in air that would be replaced within minutes by the same air. I put her books in a neat stack on the coffee table, topped with the Polaroid of us from Lake Merritt, where we were holding each other like people who had just learned the word always. The photo looked like a still from a film whose ending we hadn't spoiled yet. At 6:27 p.m., the lock turned. She stepped in with a bag and a face that had been crying in bathrooms. Her eyes were rimmed red, but her posture was careful, spine straight, chin steady, as if the body had agreed to carry the heart through this politely. Hi, she said. Hi, I said. We stood there a heartbeat too long. The rain tapped the window like an old friend with bad timing. She moved past me into the hallway, her hand trailing the wall as if to remind it she still knew its shape. In the bedroom, she opened the wardrobe and paused, hand on the navy dress I had unfolded and refolded into obedience. I'll be quick, she said. Take your time, I said, though time had been taking us for months. She packed in quiet motions. I sat on the edge of the bed like a spectator at a slow, private sport. At one point she turned and looked at me like she wanted to say something that wasn't "I'm sorry." Her mouth parted, closed. The rain deepened, a gray curtain drawing across the room. When she zipped the bag, the sound felt final, a seam being sealed. At the door she stopped. "I never wanted to break you," she said. "You didn't," I said. "You just showed me where I cracked." She flinched at that, the smallest tremble. Then she nodded, without agreeing. She stepped into the hallway light and looked smaller there, like a person in a painting, scaled for perspective. I'll be in touch," she said. "Okay." She put her hand on the knob, then took it off, turned back. "He wants to meet you," she said. "He said he did." "We already did," I said, surprise. Then a slow, resigned acceptance, as if the story had been updated while she slept. She faced the door again. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice broke. She didn't cry. She gathered herself like a stack of papers in a wind, opened the door. The hallway smelled like someone else's dinner. A neighbor laughed down the corridor. She stepped into that ordinary world and pulled the door softly closed between us. The latch clicked. The apartment's quiet returned, heavy-footed and familiar. I stood there with my hand on the smooth wood where hers had just pressed, and there in that small, stupid act, I felt something answer inside me. Not anger, not yet. Not forgiveness. A muscle flexing after being asleep too long. I went to the kitchen, filled the kettle, watched the water swirl before the boil. In the reflection on the glass door, I saw myself. I looked like a man who had stayed until closing time and finally realized the music had stopped a while ago. The kettle clicked. I didn't move. The room waited with me, and the rain began again, harder, as if it had something new to say. She came back on a Saturday that smelled like wet leaves and laundry. Morning bled into afternoon without making any promises. I had washed the sheets the day before and slept on the couch like the bed, and I were negotiating boundaries. When the knock came, it didn't sound like a stranger or a friend. It sounded like a sentence that had been waiting for a verb. I opened the door and found her standing on the threshold with no bag this time. Hair pulled into a simple knot, no lipstick, the kind of plain that people wear when they want to be believed. Her hands were empty, her gaze wasn't. Behind her, the corridor's window threw a pale light across her shoulder, and she looked like she'd been drawn there by a photographer with a soft brush. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside. The apartment recognized her and adjusted itself ever so slightly, like a dog trying to decide whether to wag its tail. She sat at the table by the window, where we used to eat when we were still interrogating each other with kindness. I made coffee out of habit. The kettle behaved. I set her cup down and watched the steam climb and disappear, the persistence of things that expect to become air. "I moved some of my things," she said. "To Felix's." The name landed like an ice cube in warm water, small, disruptive, honest about its intention to change the temperature. I stared at the condensation forming on the window's lower edge, a slow necklace of clear pearls. "Okay." She studied my face for evidence of the man she had left. Perhaps he was out. I wanted to say, I wanted to do this right. I didn't. "You told the truth," I said. Eventually, I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was measuring the room between facts. She nodded. "He's not," she paused. "This isn't about leaving you for someone better. There isn't better, there's different." The words were reasonable and cruel in the way only reasonable words can be. "Different," I repeated, as if checking it for sharp corners. She looked at the chair across from her, the one she used to pull closer with her foot, a small closeness that required no permission. "He makes me feel seen," she said. "Like I am's new again, not new like younger, but new like I haven't already been decided." I absorbed that quietly, letting it sting, and then letting the sting be part of the weather. I took a sip of coffee. It had cooled enough to drink without commitment. "I made you small," I said. "I didn't mean to." Her head lifted, a startled bird. "No," she said quickly, as if afraid to let that settle in me. "You were steady." Steady felt like love, until I realized I wanted to be shaken awake. We let the honesty sit between us like a third cup. "Why are you here?" I asked finally. She exhaled through her nose, eyes skimming the table's grain like it might spell an answer. "Because I had a dream," she said softly. "We were in this apartment, but everything was slightly off. The chairs were taller. The door opened to a garden. You were standing by the stove and you turned to me and said, 'It's time,' but you didn't mean for me to leave. You meant for me to say goodbye to the life where I kept pretending." She swallowed. "And I woke up and realized I owe you a conversation that doesn't hide in toilets and text messages." The rain flirted with the window again, little taps like it was shy now. I nodded. "Okay, talk to me." She told me about the charity event, about laughing with a stranger over a painting that looked like a broken ceiling, about how he asked her a question she hadn't heard in years. What scares you? About how she answered without using the high, sweet voice she sometimes used when trying to make herself smaller in rooms full of men who loved their own reflections. I thought it would pass, she said. A crush, a spark, a reminder. But then I came home and saw you asleep on the couch with the TV still on, and I felt grief, like I was watching a version of my life where I didn't choose myself. I could have told her that choosing yourself and choosing us were not mutually exclusive, but that would have been an argument for a different year. I kept my eyes on the cup. I hate that I hurt you, she whispered. It makes me feel like my bones are wrong. You're not a villain, I said. You're just a person who wanted to feel awake. That doesn't make the earthquake smaller. We sat in that tender ugliness for a while. Outside, a bus breathed. Upstairs, someone dragged furniture with the solemnity of a ritual. The apartment wore all the sounds like a coat that fit again. Why did you buy the lingerie? I asked. The question had been waiting in the bottom drawer of my mind, folded under sweaters. She closed her eyes. Because I wanted to be someone I'm not, she said. And because I wanted to punish you for not noticing I wasn't her. And because I wanted to offer him a story that made me feel brave. Brave, the word tasted like metal and sugar. I nodded slowly. Thank you for saying it. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, and for a second we looked like us again, two people mapping a problem with pencils and patience. Do you hate me? She asked. I considered. No, I said. But I don't know what to do with the part of me that wants to. Her mouth trembled, a small collapse. She pressed her lips together, the way a person quiets a terrified horse. I came to return something, she said, and reached into her coat pocket. She set the AP bag on the table, the black ribbon tied again but less certain of itself. She slid it toward me. I can't keep it. I didn't touch it. What do you want me to do with it? Burn it, she said, and then softer, or forgive it. We both looked at the bag like it might answer for its crimes. It sat there, a dark punctuation mark at the end of a sentence we had both broken. I'm not going to beg, she said, and I believed her. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm asking you to see me as whole while you let me go. There was dignity in that. There was also an ache that felt older than the building. I stood and walked to the window. The rain had softened into a mist that made the city look like it was whispering to itself. I placed my forehead against the glass and let the coolness iron something inside me. Behind me, her chair scraped lightly. Footsteps approached, then stopped. I didn't turn. I could feel her close enough to recognize her breath, the rhythm I had fallen asleep to 1,000 times. She didn't touch me. That restraint felt like a kind of love. I'm going to pack the rest of my books, she said, her voice steady again. If that's okay. Okay, I said. The word left my mouth and joined the others we had released into this room, a small flock circling the ceiling. In the bedroom, the zipper opened and closed. The ritual of departure resumed, gentler now, like folding sheets that will be stored for a season. I picked up the AP bag and placed it in the sink, turned the tap. Watched the ribbon darken, the paper surrender its stiffness, the cardboard slumping like a shoulder at the end of a day. The lace inside resisted for a second, then sighed, then floated, a black leaf. She came to the doorway and saw what I was doing. For a heartbeat, something like grief flickered across her face, grief not for the object, but for the person who had needed it. She nodded, as if blessing the small funeral. I turned off the tap and left it there, heavy with water, patient. Felix wants to come by, she said, to help carry. The idea of him in our rooms felt terrible and accurate. Okay, I said. I surprised myself. Maybe I wanted the story to be done drawing itself out. Maybe I wanted to look him in the eye with the light of our window on his face. 10 minutes later, the buzzer rang. I pressed the door. The stairwell amplified footsteps, made them sound like drama. He appeared in the doorway with a cardboard box and a careful smile that was almost apologetic and almost proud. He said my name like a question. I nodded like an answer. He moved through the apartment with the gawky caution of a substitute teacher. Their hands brushed once as they lifted a stack of books, and that small touch felt like a toll paid on a bridge I didn't cross. He avoided the bedroom closet. He glanced at the sink and then away, understanding more than I wanted him to. We worked in strange choreography: lift, hold, pass, not touch. At the threshold, box in his arms, he paused. If you ever want to, he trailed off. Offering friendship would have been obscene. Offering silence felt like an insult. He settled on "I'm sorry" again, but this time it was not a performance. It came from somewhere he hadn't rehearsed. I nodded once. She stood, bag on her shoulder, looking at the room like a person memorizing a face. Thank you, she said, as if I had given her something instead of losing it. She touched the doorframe with her fingertips, a private ritual, and then they were both in the hallway, outlined against the brighter corridor light, a silhouette of a future that wasn't mine. Do you want me to lock it? She asked. Leave it, I said. I'll close it. The door swung slowly, and for a second I could see both of them and the room behind me in the same frame, past and after syncing up like bad weather patterns. The latch met the strike plate and hovered, millimeters apart, as if the apartment were taking one last deep breath. Then it clicked home, clean and final. I stood there with my hand on the wood again. The quiet settled around me like a patient animal. In the sink, the lace had sunk, water stilled. A small drip from the tap ticked the seconds. Somewhere inside, a part of me stood up from a chair and looked around at the empty, waiting afternoon and wondered what could be built in a space like this. And then the key turned again, and the door inched open, and she stepped back inside alone with rain on her eyelashes, not crossing the threshold, just hovering there as if the floor beyond it belonged to a different life. "Can I leave the key?" she asked, voice small. She held it out on her palm like a coin offered to a river. I didn't move. We watched each other across the narrow strip of hallway light, two people, a key, and the quiet promise of an ending that hadn't learned its final line. Morning arrived honest, with light that didn't try to make anything prettier. It laid itself across the floorboards in pale rectangles and turned the dust into a slow, private ballet. The city's hum was distant, generous. A truck reversed somewhere, beeping with the stubborn optimism of things that believe they will fit. The apartment smelled like coffee and clean cotton, and a rain that had done its work and moved on. Her key sat in the ceramic dish by the door, small and modest, as if it didn't know it had been part of our shared body. I picked it up between finger and thumb and felt the faint warmth it had stolen from the room. I turned it over. The little teeth looked harmless in daylight. I didn't sleep much. Not the bad kind of not sleep, the desperate, bargaining kind, but the watchful kind, the kind where the mind takes inventory and throws away expired apologies. Around 3, I stood at the window and watched the streetlights click off in order like a patient, vertical sunrise. Around 4, I made a list in my head of all the things that could stay and all the things that needed to go. The AP bag had dried into a shapeless ghost and gone into the bin. Her navy dress would leave later, neatly folded into a box marked hers, because endings deserve good manners. At 6, I brewed coffee. The kettle sang softly, the way a canary might if it trusted the mine. I poured a cup and held it without drinking, letting the steam dampen my face. The mug was one she bought on a trip with her sister, yellow glaze, a chipped rim that caught your lip like a reminder. I set it down and chose another mug. Small choices teach the body what it can live without. The key looked back at me from the dish. I put it on the table where the light could find it. It made a tiny chime against the wood, a note so high and brief it was almost hope. I thought about forgiveness, about the way people talk about it like a large, single act, a door swinging wide. It has never felt like that to me. Forgiveness feels like mourning, gradual, ordinary, built from 1,000 small, gentle decisions in rooms that used to hurt. It feels like choosing a mug. She had cried in the hallway last night. Not the falling apart kind. She holds herself like a careful stack of plates, but the tremble at the edges kind, the one that leaves salt without spectacle. She left the key on my palm and stepped back, and the door closed with a whisper, as if it had learned to be kind. I took the key now and went to the bedroom. Opened the top drawer of my bedside table, old receipts, a dead pen, a postcard from a town we meant to visit. I placed the key inside and shut the drawer. Not a shrine, not a prison. Just a place to keep a piece of metal that used to open us. The day unfolded like a modest gift. I changed the sheets. The empty chair in the living room sat with its patient patience. I angled it toward the window again, creating the small V-shape we used to sit inside, not because I planned on sharing it, but because the room liked that geometry. I watered the plants and found new brown leaves hiding under green. I clipped them away and apologized out loud, a habit from childhood I thought I'd stopped. Around noon, a line of sunlight found the table and drew a bright edge under the mug. The line looked like a promise you make to yourself and keep in secret. I wrote a note for her, just a line. "Your navy dress is in the box by the door. Take care." No punctuation. The sentence didn't need to be chaperoned. I expected to feel empty. Instead, I felt like a room after a party, quiet and full of evidence that something true happened here. The smell of laughter, the shadow of arguments, the ghost of music. You open a window and let the morning decide what stays. I walked to the sink and turned the tap a little, letting cold water run over my wrists until the buzzing in my nerves settled. Outside, the rain had stopped negotiating and given us clear sky, the kind the city rarely wears without irony. A child shouted and then laughed, a sound like silverware. Somewhere distant, a church bell practiced forgiving. Felix texted, "Thank you for yesterday," he wrote. "I know it wasn't easy." I stared at the words and felt nothing hot for the first time. I typed, "Take care of her," deleted it. Typed, "No need to thank me," deleted it. Placed the phone face down and walked away. Some messages don't need an answer. They need time to learn their own volume. In the afternoon, I took the box to the door and set it beneath the coat hooks. The weight felt right, as if it contained exactly what it should and not one piece more. I stood there for a minute, looking at the door, remembering the hundreds of times it had framed her body coming toward me. I let myself feel it. The first time she brought me flowers and apologized for nothing. The night we argued about money and made up by counting each other's breaths until we lost track. The morning we left for the ocean at dawn, our coffees burning our tongues in the best way. In the kitchen, the kettle clicked. It had never let me down. I made tea this time, a quiet one that doesn't brag. I took it to the window and watched the light move across the rooftops in slow, confident strides. For the first time in weeks, my chest felt less like a fist and more like a hand opening. If forgiveness is mourning, then letting go is the first honest yawn, not dramatic, a stretch that says to the body, you can be larger than this hurt. I stood, I stretched, and the room made sense. My phone buzzed again, her name. Can I pick up the box this evening? I typed, yes. Then, before sending, I added, it will be by the door, I won't be here. I pressed send and felt the decision land softly. The rest of the day was a rehearsal for a life that didn't require me to explain myself to a ghost. I read 3 pages of a book and fell asleep in the chair, catching myself before my head slipped into that uncomfortable angle. I woke to the late afternoon light, a warmer gray, like the city clearing its throat. I put on a coat and walked to the corner store, bought eggs, bread, the cheap jam that tastes like childhood. The cashier said, "How you doing?" And I said, "Better," and was surprised at how true it sounded even to me. When I got back, the box was gone. The doormat had shifted a little, proof of a gentle departure. No note, no key. The drawer kept that. I felt the smallest ache, like remembering something sweet, and then realizing sweetness was a season. I made eggs and ate them standing up, a ritual of bachelors and monks. The yolk bled into the plate like sunset. Night gathered itself without fuss. I turned off lights room by room, grateful for each small darkness. In bed, I lay on my side and faced the space where she used to be and didn't feel punished by it. I placed a hand on the sheet and patted it once, like you do with a loyal animal. You did good, I said to the bed, to myself, to the part of me that had waited through rain and silence for a door that would open inward. Before sleep, I went to the window and looked out at the street. The sky had cleared enough to show a blunt scattering of stars through the city's glow. A man walked his dog. A couple passed by, their shoulders touching, their conversation a private river. I thought of her, of them, of me, not with flame, not with ice, with a warmth that didn't need to be shared to be real. In the morning, I will still wake up in this apartment. I will choose a mug. I will make coffee. The chairs will sit with their old patience. The plants will reach for light. Rain will come when it wants and leave when it's done. I will be here when it does. The key will stay in the drawer a while longer, a small metal moon in a private night. One day, I will take it out and drop it in a box destined for somewhere else, and it will make a sound like a coin buying me a second chance. Tonight, I turn off the last lamp and let the room fill with the soft kind of dark that doesn't frighten. I lie down, I breathe, and for the first time, the quiet doesn't feel empty. It feels like space. I breathe, and for the first time, the quiet doesn't feel empty. It feels like space.